Hello, amazing people. Welcome to the Ryan Files, the show where we pull back the curtain on the unexplained, the hidden, and the downright bizarre. Tonight, we take a journey into one of the most chilling and mysterious legends in American folklore, the Mothman, a winged red-eye entity that stalked the shadows of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. A harbinger of doom? A government experiment gone wrong? Or something far stranger, like an interdimensional entity that defies all logic? And what if I told you the sightings never stopped? Joining me is none other than Heather Moser, producer and researcher for Small Town Monsters, an expert on cryptids, folklore, and the unexplainable. We're diving deep into the origins, the theories, the eerie connections to UFOs, the men in black, and the chilling reality that this thing still might be out there. So buckle up, stay sharp, and whatever you do, don't lock eyes with that mysterious creature out there lurking in the dark. Let's go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this week on the Ryan Files. We have a special guest this week that I'm really excited about. I've been waiting since January to have someone on about this, and we got the perfect person. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, one and only Heather Moser. Thank you so much for coming on. You're a producer with Small Town Monsters, and you have decided to come on and help myself and my audience understand a little bit about Mothman. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's get down into it. Number one, Small Town Monsters, out of Ohio, correct?
Yes, we're out of Ohio.
I grew up in Ohio, so more the Columbus area, but I've been down to Southern Ohio, and there's some cool, mystical kind of stuff going on down there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're not far from the Akron-Canton area, actually. Massillon, Ohio is about where we're based out of. So, But yeah, we've done a lot of work along the Ohio River Valley.
Awesome. And that's obviously where we're talking about Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the home of the Mothman. As so much of this is I was down there in January, and a friend of mine, Dwight Eisenhower, believe it or not, that's his name, he was from Ohio, Pomeroy, on just the other side of the river, kind of. And he told me about this, and I was in the area, and I just, said, okay, I'm going to get into it. And there is something kind of interesting about, I don't know, maybe you go in there with certain expectations, but there's a certain feel. And we'll talk more about it, as far as getting out to the TNT plant area and all that stuff. But, this originally came about because of a novel by what it was John Keel, The Mothman Prophecies, which was turned into a movie, obviously, with Richard Gere. But what's your thoughts about how this whole origin of the Mothman started, and just kind of give us an overview, at least to start out.
So a lot of people attribute the origins of Mothman to about a 13-month time period between November of 1966 and December 15th, when the Silver Bridge collapsed in 1967. Started with some sightings around the Point Pleasant area of people seeing something that initially they called more of a Birdman instead of a Mothman. Like today, we think of this insect-like looking creature, but initially it was described otherwise. It was described more like a humanoid bird type figure. So that had happened. There were sightings from 66, November of 66 until December of 67. And then things seemed to die off after that point. Conjecture is that what actually happened is that once the Silver Bridge collapsed, they did lose 46 lives in the Silver Bridge collapse. That after that happened, people didn't really want to talk about fanciful stories so much, and reality kind of set in, and so that kind of stemmed the tide, so to speak, of Mothman sightings. But if you look at projects like Small Town Monsters, Mothman Legacy, we go into stories that these Mothman sightings didn't stop in 67. They actually continued and still continued through to this day. But yes, John Keel wrote a book about 10 years after everything was said and done it's done in Point Pleasant. And then that later became a movie, of course, that is very famous. But some of the extra things, like the screenwriter, Richard Hatem, has discussed before that he loved the story, was intrigued by the story, of course, but added more emphasis to it. So some of these stories that we hear about, like uh, Mothman being seen right before a massive destruction of some nuclear plant somewhere, doesn't necessarily mean that it happened. He added that in for extra flair, some more credibility to it. But Mothman has been seen, or Mothman-like creatures have been seen all over the place. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's a little quick rundown.
is it not considered, I guess by some to be like a harbinger of bad things, like
Yeah,
you see a Mothman, something bad's going to happen.
right. And I think that that was a large thing that they took into account because of the Silver Bridge collapse. People saying that he was kind of an omen foreshadowing that the bridge would collapse. But um, I don't I don't personally agree with that assessment. But yes, lots of people have said that.
Well, I'll tell you what is interesting about the Silver Bridge, kind of being a geek myself. Isn't it crazy that number one, that the Silver Bridge was, this was like talked about as the world's best technology of the time. It was a really big deal getting that bridge that connected Ohio to West Virginia. It really helped both sides of the river. It helped them in terms of the city's growing. Point Pleasant became a city because of that bridge. I mean, it became a real place. And so, and they had a special, I mean, it was like this massive event, having this bridge, and there was parades on it, and it was like the pride of the city. And there's other countries in the world that use the same technology from this bridge because it was the latest and greatest and most awesome thing. It almost feels like the Titanic in a way, you know.
Right.
But it did have massive engineering flaws that obviously, one of those eye bolts went bad and the whole bridge collapsed. I mean, it had a massive impact on safety, specifically with bridges in the not just the United States but worldwide. But such a very simple flaw that caused this entire bridge, and I think 44, 46 individuals to lose their lives.
46, yeah.
46 individuals. So, you don't want to make light of that for sure.
No.
In terms of, talking about this crazy, weird cryptid creature, but it is a part of the story. And it is fascinating to me how just one little mistake on an eye bolt could cause that entire bridge to collapse. Is incredible.
Yeah, it's incredibly sad.
Yeah. So as you go through this Mothman thing, I mean, it's not like, well, let's start here. Point Pleasant, this specific area in this specific incident, okay, is the Mothman, that term, Mothman, is that only in this Point Pleasant area? Because there's places all around the world. I mean, I was looking earlier, researching. You've got the Owl Man from Cornwall, England. You've got the Van Meter Visitor from Iowa. You got the
Yeah.
Houston Batman, Texas, the Blackbird of Chernobyl in Ukraine, the Thunderbird, which is obviously goes back to Native Americans, tribes in the United States and Canada. You got La Lechuza in Mexico. You got the giant bat of Venezuela. You got the Friedberg monster in Austria. The Hahu in Indonesia. Orange Batty, Indonesia. I mean, it's just all over. The Bat Squatch from Mount St. Helens.
Yeah.
The Ropin from Papua New Guinea. I mean, all over the world, you have this similar creature, and at times it's a harbinger of bad things to come. Mount St. Helens is another perfect example. So are we talking about the same creature potentially, or do you think these are just all separate incidents?
That's a great question. I think that it kind of depends on one, where you are and the vocabulary that you have available to you based on how you describe what you've seen. So for instance, the term Mothman, that's used, of course, around West Virginia, but also you have sightings that were happening up around Chicago, and they use the term Mothman, but they've also used the term flying humanoid. It just depends on who's speaking, what their frame of reference is, and I guess the best available description that they can give, because the descriptions have ranged from all over. I mean, like I said early on with the Mothman stories, as we know him from Point Pleasant, he was known as the bird or the Birdman. So we have that imagery of a bird. But now people are having sightings of these, I guess you'd say winged humanoids or whatever, that have like leathery type skin. I've talked to witnesses who've described it as more like a bat type situation, but it all falls under the umbrella of what we say for Mothman now. It's almost become a catch-all term when you get something that's flying in human size.
Right, right. And this is fascinating too because okay, so a dude or a gal with wings. It's kind of like, that's cool. It's kind of wild and whatnot, but you know, obviously, you start thinking, okay, how would this happen? Is this like, genetic manipulation? Is this just some cryptid creature? There's lots of theories about the what this creature actually is.
Mhm.
Interdimensional and all kinds of stuff. What are all the different, plausible realities of what Mothman is or is not?
Well, when you get to something like Point Pleasant in the TNT area, some people say that there was some sort of contamination that occurred, because you're dealing with something like TNT, nuclear type based munitions and things like that. So there's that thought process. But also, I think it's almost easier to say that these are some sort of interdimensional creature that every once in a while pops forward, then you can see, because we've had sightings where people have actually seen them pop out of a portal type. um, the one I'm thinking of was somebody describing it over a lake. They said it was like a portal, and then one of these things popped out through it. But because it looks so odd, and when we think about what's actually possible that we're aware of scientifically, flying humans aren't a thing. So it's almost easier to explain the unexplainable with something else that's unexplained that we just don't understand. Because honestly, I have no idea what some of the parameters would be to get such a creature. I'm not a biologist. I can just say that it doesn't exist. Um, as far in that capacity, I'm not saying that people haven't seen things and that a Mothman doesn't exist. I'm just saying that you and I sprouting wings and flying away isn't happening.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So let's go talk about a couple of these options. Number one, let's talk about the portal thing. Interdimensional beings. You see this phenomenon sometimes rear its head around Bigfoot, Sasquatch.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of people that talk about portals. That, of course, then connects to Bigfoot, and UFO sightings sometimes go hand in hand. And
Hmm.
there was also UFO sightings allegedly around the same time with Mothman, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and of course, then you get into that leads you into government involvement at some point potentially, and the Men in Black discussion gets brought in. Like it all becomes one big mess. But yes, when it comes to cryptids, there's a lot of conjecture about something such as portals to explain the unexplainable. When it comes to Bigfoot, you hear that it uses an excuse for why sometimes the tracks of footprints just stop suddenly. Or maybe there's only one footprint out in the middle of nowhere, but nothing else. Or they manifest out of, I mean, not only do they stop abruptly, but they just manifested in the middle of a field. How does that happen? Well, he walked in and out of a portal. Um, so that is a discussion that gets brought up a decent amount. But I've not seen a portal myself. I'm, again, having talked to so many witnesses, though, I don't discredit anything. I've seen weird stuff enough so that I can't discredit other people's experiences, because some of the stuff that I've experienced is weird enough that it shouldn't have existed. I shouldn't have experienced it. It shouldn't have been a thing. So who am I to say, you know what, you're wrong on that. You didn't actually see a Mothman, and you didn't see something pop out of a portal. I don't know what you saw. I wasn't there. And also, that leads us into the discussion of how do things manifest from person to person. One person may see something, like two people could see the same thing, but it registers differently in their brain. Their brain computes it differently. So just because maybe I would be there while someone saw something pop out of a portal doesn't mean that I would see the same scenario, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny. There's actual science behind that. I forget exactly what it's called, but like, you know, police reports, 5 different
Right.
eyewitnesses and just how different it'll be based upon, so many different factors that go into it. So yeah, you're absolutely right. But it is interesting when you look back to Native American stuff, all across the United States, Canada, even down into Mexico, like these symbols that we know just through oral tradition, even these are portals, symbols,
Mhm.
petroglyphs of portals, and petroglyphs of these winged creatures, a thunderbird. Um,
Mhm.
and even it goes so far as to talk about like Skinwalker Ranch. You get into some of that stuff, and you see these alleged portals that they're getting up on different kinds of scans where and it matches with the rock portals that they have on top of the mesa. It really makes you wonder if these things are real, and that maybe Native Americans, ancient cultures, really knew exactly what they were and how to control them, and in some way, shape, or form was connecting with this other realm.
I think that there's something to be said about ancient cultures, Native Americans and other ancient cultures, even predating that, about the ability to be in tune with nature in general that we have lost as we progress through time, because most of us now are in our houses most of the time. We're not going out and hiking. And if you are hiking, it's just something you do on the weekend or something. It's not what you have to live by. But we're distracted by all of these extemporaneous things that we're not in tune with nature like we once were as humans. Um, and I think that another aspect that kind of leads to that is during the COVID shutdown, at least in my realm of study with research and witness reports and so on, during the COVID shutdown, things spiked exponentially, at least from what I was seeing, as far as people being outside and having experiences out in nature, because everything was done. There was all this extra noise of going to the office every day from 9 to 5 because you were working at home, or even hours were cut down, or maybe your job was lost altogether. All of this extra noise was gone and people were becoming more in tune with their surroundings. More things started to happen. I don't think that that necessarily means that more stuff was actually really happening so much as we were more aware
Yeah.
of what was going on.
Wow, that's very interesting. And what it's hard to create that kind of situation where you can actually get that kind of data, but we actually went through it, and it's interesting
Mhm.
that that's what you observed. Huh.
Mhm.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, though. You'd have to suspect like there wasn't an uptick in stuff, just an uptick in awareness, maybe.
Yeah.
Uh, I had a friend I met a few years back when I was down in Peru, and she had seen a number, and I mean, videotaped them with her camera or cell phone. Um, these weird alien orb looking things, up in the sky. She lives in Dallas. And I mean, they're just up there just doing this weird thing. And she's got them on her camera, and she has a ton of them. All right. And she said, you know what? I never used to do it. But one day I had a dream, and I just, in the middle of the dream, I heard the words, just look up. And so she said, I just started throughout the day, just look up. And all of a sudden I started seeing it. I mean, she's showing me we're on Machu Picchu, at the top of Machu Picchu, and she's showing all these different. I'm like, what is going on? It's crazy. So maybe it
Mhm.
is just about, maybe get her, maybe if we didn't walk around like this all the time, maybe we
Yeah.
would see a little bit more, right?
Yeah. Well, and that was a discussion that we had with some witnesses when we were filming On the Trail of UFOs Dark Sky, which was based in West Virginia. The discussion of why, just to locals, why do you think weird stuff happens here? Why do you think there are so many UFO sightings in West Virginia? And some of the answers that we got were very much like that. Like one from, there's nothing else to do around here but hang out at night and look at the sky, to the, a lot when you're in a remote area in West Virginia, which if you're not in the city, a lot of West Virginia is remote. You don't have the light pollution. You can see so much more if you just go outside and just take a moment and look. So I think there is something to be said about that, the amount of awareness that you put into your surroundings and in nature in general. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you got the portal side of this equation with Mothman. You also have this TNT factory side of it. Have you ever been back there?
I was there once while we were filming a series. Yes, I was there. And it was miserable. It was hot and there were ticks and it was all overgrown. It was cool to see the igloos. That was neat. They were creepy. I will give you that. But I just what was the overwhelming memory of that was just it was so miserably hot the day that I was there.
I can only imagine. And what's so funny about that is I went, this past winter, January was just so stinking cold all over the place. Mm-hmm. But that was the only time I had to go. So I went, and I mean, it was all snow. I have a 4-wheel drive, but I got back there, and I mean, I was up to my, ankles and boots going through the snow, and I got to one of these igloos, man, and it was open. I went in. Oh my God. That is perhaps the most eeriest, scariest, weird. I mean, I was out there by myself, and I was like, this probably isn't the smartest thing to be doing. Anybody in there? Hello? Wow. Wow. Inside of this. Obviously there's a lot of graffiti but wow, man, this is crazy. Look up. All the way to the top. Pretty eerie. Pretty eerie. What's really cool though is that if you look out in the distance, all this right back here, man, you can see There's a bunker there. There's a bunker there. A bunker, a bunker, a bunker, a bunker. I bet you if you go down this road, you'll see even more. They're everywhere. It's pretty crazy. Taken over by nature now. Because you're walking in it too, and it's like, so it was bright daylight out, half snow blind because everything's covered in snow. You know, it's like 10 degrees, and as you're walking to go in, you're totally blind because there's no light inside, so anything could be in there, and until your eyes adjust, you're just, you're anyway. It was unsettling to say the least.
Yeah.
And of course, your imagination can take over and whatnot when you're in these situations and you're by yourself and blah 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 blah. But there was an unsettling feeling in that area. I felt like, and I'm not saying that I have any kind of whatever, but there was something unsettling about that area to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not the only one who's felt that way by any stretch of the imagination. So it is a creepy feeling, especially I can't imagine being out there alone. I wouldn't do it myself. But yeah, it's something. And then just the way the sounds echo in there are eerie on their own, whether you're talking or clapping or a rock drops or anything like that. It's just the way things echo in those igloos is unsettling on its own. So you've got everything working against you.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess like that TNT, that they call it the TNT factory, I guess, but World War II, these igloos or whatever, they were manufacturing TNT for World War II. And a lot of the TNT that helped win World War II was developed in this area, from what I understand. And obviously the bunkers were over, so they were in bunkers for safety, number one, but number two, if you flew over, you wouldn't know that there was TNT manufacturing going on in that area. So it couldn't be bombed or whatever. But with every government project, though, it seems like sometimes there's just something a little, well, this far corner over here, we're actually doing something different. And it has that feeling to it. Sorry, but it does.
Yeah.
Well, and then, Men in Black, what's that all about? And I mean, you do a lot of research in a number of different spaces. Men in Black, what's your opinion on who are they? What are they?
Boy, I don't know, because the range of reports are kind of all over the place, from it seeming like an unspecified government entity that's coming to you because you've stumbled across something the government doesn't want you to know about, and certainly doesn't want you sharing publicly on social media or television or whatnot. So there's that, the basic, clearly it's the government. But then you've got other reports where they seem almost alien-like or robotic-like. They're not acting normal. They're not behaving normally. Or the one story, which the exact details are going to slip my mind, but I remember the piece that sticks with me is when they talked about they went to rub their face, and it was like makeup came off onto their glove, like lipstick or whatever, almost off of this guy's face. So clearly he was painted up to look a certain way. Stories of people seeing wires going down through the pant leg and connecting to something in the shoe, or vice versa, either way, but they're seeing a wire between the pant leg and the shoe. So what is that? Is that just a secret device to communicate with someone else? Is there something alien about that? What is going on? So it's all over the place as to what they could be, because nobody's come forward and said, yeah, hey, we're the government agency involved in
Right.
in that. And why would they, if they exist like that, if there is a government agency, which I'm not putting it past the government at all to have an agency that would be unnamed and in dark SUVs and the dark clothes. Also, though, people have talked about being followed and tailed by things that don't look like Men in Black anymore, with the theory that they've wisened up to what they look like And it's too obvious whenever they come around in their black sedans and in their suits. So they look more like you and I now, but regular clothing.
But still, yeah, but still the intimidation, the following,
Yes,
tracking, and all that stuff. Huh.
absolutely.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
And women in black apparently is a thing. We always say men in black, but apparently there are reports of women in black as well, which I thought was cool.
it's about time. We need a little diversity
Yes.
in the in black industry. I think
Uh-huh.
yes.
Yes, in the
Um,
intimidation industry. Let's go.
yep, absolutely. I think it's I think it's highly probable. I mean, you just hear too many stories on
Mhm.
too many things that are just like connected where people are getting intimidated, just said, told to, hey, you love your family. Come on, do the right thing here. That kind of
Yeah.
secret, intimidation without really intimidating, just kind of stuff. Um, and there's, that's not the kind of thing like just Joe, whoever, Joe Smith down the road, just decides he's going to dress up in a black suit and come over and intimidate. You know what I mean? It's like, number one, these individuals, these uh, people in black, if you will, uh, they they know the secret that you know,
Right.
and it sounds like they know it maybe even more than you know, whatever that secret may be. But maybe it's an alien crash, maybe it's a UFO sighting, maybe it's this, that, the other, whatever it is. They know about it, and they know more than you know about it, and they're just telling
Mhm.
you to pipe down about it, or
Yeah.
bad things may happen. So it's not like I said, it's not just like some, Tom, Dick, or Harry down the road is doing this because they don't have the knowledge. And, it takes it takes some guts, I guess, to do
Yeah.
something like that, unless that's your job to do it. So, yeah, I agree. Very interesting. All right. So let's think about this now with, and I know we touched on Mothman, and I think, you know, whether Mothman is real or not, um, you can't deny that there's a lot of people who have claimed to see it. There
Yeah.
are coincidences with it being a harbinger of bad things to come. Um, but whether or not that's true, we don't have one, in a cage, and we haven't, there's not been any kind of real proof of anything like that. So it's, gets into that whole universe of who knows. But in your work with small town monsters, you guys get into a lot of stuff. I mean, the documentaries from the Minerva monster, Boggy Creek monster. You've done the Mothman stuff, the Mark of the Bell Witch. You guys get into some really cool stuff. Skinwalker, American
Mhm.
Werewolves, the Jersey Devil, all that stuff. What is some of the most compelling stuff that you've researched and been a part of, getting into?
So the most compelling pieces of evidence for me are when you talk to these witnesses and they're having a very intense emotional reaction. Not like, but a sincere emotional reaction, not like they're acting or anything like that. It's just they're clearly moved by whatever happened to them. So to me, that says that they experienced something traumatic. Um, Whether someone wants to argue that they had an experience and now their brain is masking that as something else, which our brains can do. I'm not debating that. Um, I'm not going to argue with them that they didn't see a Bigfoot when they went outside or a dog man or whatever. Something happened to them. This is how they have interpreted it. That very well may be what had happened. But they are completely moved by it, if not sometimes outright ruined by it in one way or another. The stories that people have been holding on to for decades before they come forward, to me, is also evidence in itself because why would you hold on to this story for 30 years out of fear of ridicule um, until you felt safe enough to come forward? Like, what's the point of that? I don't know. I'm not saying that every story that I've heard I think is true, but a lot of them that have come forward, you can just tell the sincerity in their voice, in their story. You can see it more whenever you talk to them face to face, of course, but um that's the stuff that's really wild to me. I treasure those interactions over pictures of footprints or casts or whatever, but I'm not a scientist either, so I'm not waiting for that evidence. To me, it's the human factor that is the most compelling piece of evidence that we have.
All right. What in your, and I mean, you don't have to go into specifics, obviously, names and all that, but what, genre is it mostly Bigfoot that you're talking about, or are there other genres of stories that were really compelling to you?
So of course the Bigfoot stories, we have more Bigfoot stories than I think we have any other cryptid. There's just no way around it.
Right.
So yes, there's definitely Bigfoot stories, but I'm also specifically thinking of like Martin Groves, for example, who had a dogman encounter in the land between the lakes. He was featured in our American Werewolves movie, the first American Werewolves movie, and a retired police officer that had an encounter. There's Bigfoot involved in his story as well, but to hear Martin, I don't see how anybody could know Martin, see him, hear his story, and think that guy is making up a story. Like that's just I can't even fathom that. Um, just purely based on the emotion that he has when every time he tells the story, and then him as a person, to get to know some of these people, you're like, what would be the point of coming up with such a story? Especially whenever it's something like this where the ridicule level is high, the risk is high to have people mock you and say awful things. Why would somebody come forward and make up such a story? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And for people that are wanting to say that it's a grab at fame or whatever, like why this arena? Like why are we picking this? I don't.
There's better fame you can probably put your hands on,
Right.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, it's just these stories that so Bigfoot and Dogman, UFO witnesses that have remained anonymous for years and then have come forward. In Dark Sky, there is a witness who still wants to remain anonymous. And so their face is obscured and their voices changed. But I found them through looking through old newsletters, UFO newsletters from like the mid 90s.
Oh,
And at that point in time, they were a teenager and they wrote into the UFO newsletter and they gave their name and where they like their name in their town. And so I was like, well, if they still live there, I'll find them, which they do. So I found them and messaged them and I'm like, I know this is going to sound really weird if this isn't you, but if it is you, are you the one who wrote the letter about the UFO encounter? Um, and they said, how in the world did you find that newsletter? I didn't even know that they published my letter. I remember writing it. I didn't know that they published it. Um, but because of where they are in life now, they don't want their identity out there.
sure.
They've got too much to lose. So, I mean, you've got to take that into consideration too. The people that are even still too nervous to come forward because of what they've encountered and the chance of ridicule. And but then you've got other people like going back to American Werewolves, the guy we call the Judge, who also is got his own podcast and everything now, but he's a judge. And like, why would he come up with this story of seeing a dog man when you're a judge? Like, I don't think he's lying. I do not think he's lying. And no one's going to convince me otherwise. Like, I can't see the point in it. There's too much to risk.
All right. Isn't it crazy? You've got some people who are like, I don't want this could hurt me, so I want to be incognito. And there's other people that are being accused of seeking the fame and the attention.
Mhm.
And then there's judges who,
Yeah.
have everything to lose and including their credibility at their job. And That's
Right.
wild. I mean, I have a cousin who was a major in Space Force and
Nice.
freely admits I've seen a UFO, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's like uh, I don't know. I think it's just
Yeah.
too much evidence on some of this stuff to just dismiss it. I'm not saying that maybe weird things can happen and it can be misinterpreted. Sure, absolutely. But man, it only takes one thing to be true for you to suddenly realize, okay, now, you know, wow,
Right.
there's a
If
lot.
this is true, then what else can be true?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the biggest phenomenon, and tell me if I'm wrong, but from what I read up on and whatnot, the biggest phenomenon is obviously got to be um, UFO UAP sightings. Now, I'm not saying seeing
Mhm.
aliens, and I'm not saying
Right.
abductions. I'm just saying seeing the craft, and yeah,
Hmm.
it could be government. Obviously, it could be all these different things, but that's probably the biggest phenomenon that you probably encounter. I would guess. Is that correct? Just
Yeah,
seeing.
well, uh, yes, that's one of the big ones right now. It seems like just because of where we live and the content that we put out on a regular basis, which is highly Bigfoot centric, I get a lot of Bigfoot reports. But the UAP UFO reports are coming in more regularly now, especially since the government has come forward and admitted some things.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but so people now are more at ease to say, yeah, actually, I did experience this, because now it's more socially acceptable to say that. I think that that's what I'm seeing with the Bigfoot reports versus other type of cryptid reports as well, is that since things like Finding Bigfoot came out several years ago and it becomes more of a pop culture icon, it becomes more acceptable to say, I have had this encounter. I did experience this because it's, I guess, less taboo in some
right.
way.
Yeah, yeah, and you're absolutely right. With Luisa Elizondo, who used to be the former director of ATIP, coming forward and saying, I just went and saw him a few months back, and his point was literally like, I know what's going on, and I want to tell you, I just can't. But
Yeah.
you know, when you guys start asking the right questions, you're gonna know, and so it's like, oh, wow, what's that even mean?
Hmm.
But it is very, it's in your face. There's no doubt about it. Obviously the elephant in the room is these craft UFOs or whatever. There's just too many sightings, and the FLIR and gimbal and go fast videos are obviously, and according to Luis Elizondo, that's the lowest quality footage they have. They have 8K footage of this stuff, but
Hmm.
he just literally says that they're real. So the question, the elephant in the room, is who are the pilots? Obviously,
Right.
so
Exactly.
But anyway, I digress. That's interesting. That area of Ohio, it's kind of like the northeastern Ohio, right?
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Um, I grew up probably 150 so miles away from there, in Pennsylvania. Crossed 80, go straight across 80. You get to about 120 some miles in, there's a town called Clearfield. And
Hmm.
then about half an hour, 45 minutes from there is a nothing town called Frenchville in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains.
Hmm.
Um, and I grew up there. And I remember as a kid, uh, we were poor and everything, but I remember as a kid, the Appalachian Mountains was my play space.
Hmm.
I mean, that's what you did in the summer, man. You were out and we had forts and we had dams that we built up and creeks and we had all this stuff. And I grew up in it, and the Appalachians are real, it's a
Yeah.
real place. But I was never, as a kid, never afraid out in
Right.
those mountains. Today, I live in the Ozarks. I live in a little town called Branson, Missouri, in the middle of the Ozarks. And if you go out my back door, there's a forest. Okay.
Hmm.
In the middle of the Ozark Mountains. And I do some hiking and stuff. And man, it's so weird. I've been around and I've done a lot of outdoor stuff, but only in this area. I'll go outside, go hiking. I'll be by myself, and I'll get some really weird feelings. Someone is watching me, that kind of stuff. And it happens at the same places, on the same trails all the time. Have you ever ran into any of that stuff?
So I think part of the explanation for the difference, I think, is that the mountains at home are home, right? You grew up with them, so of course they're comforting, and there's nothing to be afraid of. Uh, you never had any negative experiences. There are definitely some weird places around here, though, that have that eerie feeling to them, and the easiest one to point to when you talk about Pennsylvania is the Chestnut Ridge. There's all kinds of weird stuff happening on the Chestnut Ridge. It's one of those anomalous areas where everything happens. And I've been there. I've had experiences there. I've been there multiple times and had multiple experiences from the times that I've been there. But even with those odd experiences, it still feels like home. Um, so even though there have been moments where things are a little unnerving, it's still home. It's still, there's something about it, I think, because of your roots being there, that it feels like a piece of you. Where you're talking about being in the Ozarks, not growing up there, yeah, it's a different place, and they have their own monsters, right? They've got their own myths and stories, and of course, they've got things that are going to be similar to here, but it's still foreign in a way. So that might add to some of the fear or uneasiness, rather. But um, yeah, I haven't found a place here in the mountains, in the Appalachian Mountains, where I have felt like scared for my life or anything like that. I've definitely been in places where I'm like, something's uneasy, but nothing that's been too fearful. And absolutely attribute that to being home, which by home, not just for me, I'm talking like generations of my family have lived here and grown up here in this particular region. So I think that it's like ingrained in me to just be attuned to this place in one way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. Where's Chestnut Ridge?
Chestnut Ridge is in the southwestern part of Pennsylvania. It's like 70 miles of a ridge that goes from, and I'm not going to remember the name of the town that it starts in PA, but it ends in Morgantown, West Virginia.
Okay.
So it's just right there on the border. Um, but yeah, there's all kinds of stuff there, and pretty much anything you can think of, like the big ones, Bigfoot, UFOs, Dogman, all of that is there in that area. And then the weird stuff too, even weirder stuff.
Any
It's
government
kind of weird.
facilities in that area?
Um, I don't know if there are government facilities so much in that area, but there's a lot of mining in that area.
No.
And mining tends to come up a lot when you're looking at the cryptids and the sightings of cryptids, taking stuff from the earth that maybe you shouldn't have taken. Um, or just having these underground caverns where maybe something could lurk, I suppose, is part of it too.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
One of the thoughts I talked to a guy, local guy here who studies cryptids, cryptozoologist.
Hmm.
And he said one of the things I might be encountering is, you're in the middle of the Ozarks. The Ozarks are limestone granite,
Oh yeah.
and so the quartz, the piezoelectricity, the vibration and whatnot can change the electromagnetic fields, literally.
Hmm.
And maybe it's just you're walking over a big deposit of quartz, a high quartz, limestone granite, below you or
Right.
around you in those areas. And when I thought about that, it's later on in the year, I'm going to be going to the Crescent Hotel down in Eureka Springs. It's supposed to be the most haunted hotel, I guess, in the country. And know the manager there. So going to be exploring that. And there's
Nice.
two other, I mean, in Springfield, Missouri, there's a castle, and not far from there is another castle. Why are there castles in Missouri? I don't know. But they're all made of this, from the Ozarks, this quartz granite limestone, and they're all haunted, or they
Hmm.
all have these weird electromagnetic properties. I just wonder in some way, shape, or form if any of that is connected.
Yeah, I've heard that theory as well, and that's definitely something that you look into whenever you're doing research in the area for any of the filming that we've done or whatnot. Um, Looking into the geography of the area and what tends to be a similarity between that and anomalous creatures and critters that go bump in the night. But that's one thing. It could be the charging, like a charged, highly charged area because of the stone, limestone, quartz, whatever it may be. Um, but there are other things that seem to overlap as well, like how many places that are haunted or have all of these sightings, how many of them are close to bodies of water, like rivers that converge or things like that. There's something to be said about that when it comes to mythology as well.
Crossroads.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the crossroad,
crossroads.
like these liminal spaces that we have, that's another thing as well. But yes, I've definitely heard that about the stone. I haven't done any personal studies on it, but I've heard that about the different types of geography that we have and possibly being a contributing factor to what's going on
Yeah, and
and
then
how it interacts or how it affects our brain, in other words.
yes, exactly. Yeah, and that's fascinating, right? I mean,
Hmm.
and think about that as like technology being used. Lord have mercy. Um, but I am excited to get down to that Crescent Hotel.
Hmm.
I'm sure you've heard of it, and you probably know the stories. There's a madman that was curing cancer back in the
Mm.
day and killed
Yeah.
a ton of people. I mean, and just was taking money for it. And I guess the place is uber haunted and blah 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 blah. But I really want to just get down there and see what I don't know. I'm going to get some instruments together and measure at least electromagnetic fields or something. I don't
Right.
know. So just
That'll be
everybody
fun.
else, yeah, everybody else has done the ghost thing down there. I want to just see if there's any kind of science that makes any sense down there. So, but
Hmm.
anyways, well, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a fun conversation.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having me.
Um, tell my audience a little bit about small town monsters, yourself, how to get a hold of you, follow small town monsters, all that.
So, Small Town Monsters is a documentary film company based out of Ohio. We make documentaries on all kinds of strange and weird stuff, like you mentioned earlier, from Dogman and UFOs to Bigfoot and the Chupacabra. We've covered all of that. We are in officially our 10-year anniversary this year. We've been doing this for a decade.
Awesome.
Um, so we have a huge body of work that you can reference, and it's been something that's been very helpful for me as a researcher going forward to witnesses to say, hey, go to our YouTube channel and watch literally anything on there, and you'll see how we treat the topic and how we treat witnesses. As in, we're not going to be mocking anybody. We're not making light of things. We take it seriously, so and respectfully. So you can find us on YouTube, smalltownmonsters.com. You can find me on social media anywhere, on, well, not anywhere, I guess, because I don't do Twitter, but Facebook, Instagram, and you can email me, Heather at smalltownmonsters.com. That's pretty straightforward. And I have a podcast myself called The Lore You Know. It's been on hiatus for a few weeks, but we're coming back. We're recording a bunch this week and should be back within the next month, actually.
I like it. The
So,
lore, you know.
The Lore You Know, right?
What do you get into mostly?
So we talk to different storytellers and folklorists and cryptozoologists, basically people who have the passion and thought that you should save stories that people have, that there's an importance to keeping history alive and retelling it for future generations. So
That's funny.
that's the
I
gist of it.
got a really good friend here in the Ozarks that is kind of doing the same thing because there's so much lore and whatnot in the Ozarks, history, but then also the lore side of it. And, everything from cryptids to, crazy Alf Bull and killing people, and that's where
Right.
the Murder Rocks got its name. It's so there's all kinds of really cool stuff. But yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Keep it going. That's
Oh,
important
thank
stuff.
you.
And
Yeah.
if there's not people like you out there to do it, it gets lost.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. That's why I do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. My audience definitely just be aware. They'll probably at some point get a hold of you and or start watching you. So that's a good thing. And
Yeah.
but I appreciate you. And maybe sometime we'll have you back. I'm going to go down. I'll be in the Pennsylvania area during the summer quite a bit. And I have some downtime, so I'm looking for a number of places to explore and whatnot. So I'm going to have to maybe check out that little ridge you were talking about.
That's right. I'll send you a whole list of places to see in Pennsylvania in that area.
That'd be awesome. Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I appreciate you. The one and only Heather Moser. Thank you. All right, folks, what do you think? Is Mothman just a small town myth? Or are we dealing with something truly otherworldly? Did the government know more than they admitted? Are these sightings connected to UFOs, portals, or even something sinister lurking just beyond our understanding? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I want to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor, smash that like button. It helps more than you know and tells the YouTube overlords that this is the kind of content people need to see. And not subscribed yet? Now's the time. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. We cover UFOs, government secrets, cryptids, and everything they don't want you to know. You want to support the channel? Join our YouTube channel membership. Get exclusive perks and early access to episodes, and become an agent of truth on Patreon at patreon.com/The Ryan Files. And finally, share this episode with a friend who needs to hear this. The more people we wake up to these mysteries, the harder they are to suppress. You folks are amazing. Be incredible. Stay curious out there. Keep your eyes on the sky, because the truth is out there. I'll see you next time, right here, friends, on The Ryan Files.
Are you not curious?
Preparing to transfer the Ryan Files. Now.
I present to you, with great intrigue and wonder, the Ryan Files.